Welcome to Talking Tea with Auntie, where we discuss interesting topics with everyday people. And today's topic is being a man and deconstructing toxic masculinity with our guests Andrew and Dr. James Stein. And now to your gay auntie, Shining
Hello,
Nathan.
lovers. This is your gay auntie, Shining Nathan, and welcome to another episode of Talking Tea with Auntie, where we talk about everyday topics with everyday people. And I'm so excited to have this topic here for us today. And it's one that is very impactful in the modern psychospace as we discuss how to become better people, and in relations to this, better men. So I have two fantastic guests here that are going to be discussing what it means to be a man and deconstructing what is toxic masculinity within ourselves. This is a fantastic topic that I think will allow us all to grow and learn and create a healthier space for all of us to just be healthier people and understand a little bit better. So I have two fantastic guests. I'll bring the first one out shortly, and then we will get the ball rolling. And remember, if you enjoy my content, please remember to hit that notification bell and subscribe to this channel and give me a like and comment in the comment section what you would like for us to discuss next time. It helps me, helps y'all, and if you like this content as well, you can become a patron on my Patreon, patreon.com/Shining Nathan. And through that membership, you can ask future guests questions for you that they will answer. Now, let's get into our first guest, shall we? Hello, everyone. We have with us Andrew. Andrew, welcome, my love. How are you doing this evening?
I'm even better now that I'm talking to you.
Oh, well, such a flatterer. And I'm not going to complain at all. How has your evening been?
It's been great. Spent some time with my daughter before bed, make sure dinner was where it needed to be. Was able to put her to bed right before coming to talk to you. So it worked out just fine.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so give us, how young are you, sir?
How young am I? I am 33.
Okay. So you're just a year younger than me.
Yeah, no, same age range.
Perfect. And so tell me a little bit about your backstory. Tell me where you're from.
Yes, so I was born and raised in East Tennessee. So right in, the southern side of the Appalachian Mountains, right there, central southern Appalachian Mountains. I was raised in a conservative Christian house by two parents that stayed together, stayed married for, still are married. One sibling, a sister, raised in the church, raised, playing sports, going to church on Wednesday nights, Sunday morning, Sunday nights. My dad was a preacher, still is, on the side on occasion. So I'm a preacher's kid. I went to high school in East Tennessee, went to college in East Tennessee, spent most of my life in and around the Appalachian Mountains.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I learned in college that I wasn't straight, didn't come to terms with that in a way that I could say to another person, not really, until after I got married. And by that point, I was actually working in the church. I was pulled right after my undergrad, which was in communications. I was given the opportunity to work for a rather large church in East Tennessee. Supposedly as many as 2,000 members at one point in time. And went to that church, worked at that church, got ordained at that church, went to seminary while in that church, got my master's degree from a local seminary. But before that, I started talking quietly about how I wasn't just attracted to women. And that moment had shaped more of my life up to that point than I had realized, and shaped a lot of my life moving forward. That and my interactions with how ministries take care of the less fortunate and how that falls short, how that succeeds. One thing led to another, and now I work in Florida doing direct action justice work.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so that's what I do, and I garden a lot. That's part of my story. That's a whole different thing. But
and garden is an absolutely beautiful thing to be doing. And so, we're circling back around to your background in discussing what masculinity is and what it means to be a man. How did your upbringing develop that And where are you now in terms of that whole journey that has come up, that has arisen?
Yeah. So what I could say now that I could not say then is that my masculinity was shaped more by what I was told I should not be than what I was told I should be. And I think a lot of men's masculinity, a lot of people that are, assigned male at birth, raised as men, because I don't think many boys are raised as boys. I was parentified. I was adultified almost immediately. My measuring stick was not another boy. My measuring stick was be a man, which meant be an adult before I had the capacity, 20 years before my brain would fully develop to let me do that. Even though my desires were to remain a child. Anyways, so I would say that my masculinity was shaped by don't be like women. Whatever is effeminate, don't do that. It's the whatever a man is. We can't tell you exactly what it is. It's the opposite of that, though. Don't do that. Don't throw that way. Don't dance that way. Don't act that way. So a lot of it was shaped by what it means to be an Appalachian. Your emotions are to yourself. Take care of you and yours. Keep your business to yourself. Know how to hunt. Know how to, repair a house if you need to. But it was also very much shaped by my father, who, whatever he was good at, became part of his masculinity. And what I can now say about myself is whatever I enjoy about myself is now part of my personhood, or you could say my masculinity as well. I did not see then what he was able to do, which was say, because I'm a good dancer, dancing is now masculine, instead of dancing being gay, which was labeled effeminate, right? Yeah. Because I like exotic foods, that doesn't make me weird or flamboyant, as many Appalachians might suggest. Things have changed, but that's how it was with him growing up. And so he was able to take the things that he loved and insert it into his masculinity, because the only lens he had for himself of his personhood was masculine. So I guess I was shaped by his masculinity and the masculine language of the populace around me.
Yeah. And so in the terms of that learning of what is masculinity, what are things you've had to either unlearn in yourself or actualize of self? Because I know you mentioned your sexuality earlier on, but what are some other things that have either you had to unlearn or learn and actualize for you?
Yeah, so I did not realize how much my worldview was dependent on oppressive systems. I didn't realize how much my masculinity was determined by patriarchal worldviews that would not exist if it weren't for capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy. I didn't realize how much my view of masculine was also a view of man as primary and woman as secondary. I never thought those things on purpose, but looking back, it's obvious that was an underpinning of how I was both taught to navigate the world and ended up navigating the world in a lot of ways. It came out in the way that I wrote. It came out in the way that I spoke. It came out in the way that I dated. I had to unlearn this idea that the default of humanity is to be a man's man. I didn't know that was also holding me back from accepting parts of myself that I had villainized or treated as deviant.
And I think that is very true, especially because there's similarities between what the culture you're discussing in Latino male culture and the machismo-ness that is inherent within our culture. And very much so. Like, for instance, when we had my funeral for my cousin, attending the funeral, I am the Latin man. I'm stoic. I am the rock. I don't express. I can, but I'm not there for me to grieve.
By the way,
this is for somebody else.
But also, in your
case,
what is your favorite?
So I'm at that moment not allowed to grieve. I could, however, there's a priority to be there for her, my mother, than there is for me to grieve in that moment, because she's the one that needs me most. it's an interesting thing. I have broken down several things of it. Thankfully, it's going to be weird. I was not raised by my father, so I don't have necessarily the same actualizations that other men in our culture have. Because I was raised primarily by my mother, and she was kind of like, whatever you're going to be, go. Try this thing. Try this thing. Oh, you don't like that thing? Okay, go do you.
That's so interesting. So what I heard you say is that, because of your mother's influence, you had some kind of freedoms that you would imagine you would not have been able to have if you would have had your father's voice as present in those spaces.
Yes, 100%. Because my father would have wanted to mold me into what he wanted to mold me, which was a boxer, a mechanic, and a cantor. But he was in prison. So my mother's idea was, you're going to be the person you're going to be. I will introduce you to things. If you don't like it, cool. Let's keep going to something else. Let's go what you like.
That ties back to something that I didn't think of mentioning. I'm glad you mentioned that, because my father and my uncles would often joke whenever I was more emotional that it was from spending so much time around my mother, because my mother is a very expressive person. My father would have been if his emotions had not been stifled. It is obvious to me now, he is a very emotional person and was not ever given the space to actualize that, and that's not right.
No.
But because my father had internalized, it's my mother's job to raise me, and he didn't know what to do with me in some ways. So I got shaped by my mother in a lot of ways too, and in many ways for better, some ways for worse that I had to work through as well. That things happen, but if it weren't for my mother pushing me to find space in things like theater, and my father accepting dance and my mother pushing for it, I don't think I would have found a way to escape that kind of like stoicism, or like the calcification that comes from toxic masculinity. I wouldn't have been able to escape that if it weren't for being given space with my own mother.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of things that people don't really necessarily see. And so in terms of this actualization, you've gone through process of unlearning some traits and learning traits about yourself. How long ago did that happen again? And was that, I know you mentioned your sexuality, was that the catalyst for it? Or was there another series of events that predated that change? Because I guess there was a change.
Yeah. So looking back, I wrote speeches. Writing speeches is what got me through a lot of things. I did competitive speech writing and giving of speeches in high school, and then that's how I ended up getting into college, is winning a competition around writing speeches. My junior year, the speech that I went with was a speech called "Who's the Man?", talking about my frustrations about masculinity, about what it meant to be a man. And looking back, I was close, but I was still off target, because all my lenses of masculinity had to do with what women wanted and my frustrations with women. I was still pointing out and I was still accusatory, like the only way my masculinity can come to fruition is if I'm wanted by a woman. And so the measuring stick for my masculinity is what is found attractive. And it was very I was not on the Andrew Tate train, but that rhetoric, I think if someone would have found me in that fragile state, I could have potentially gone in a different direction than the one that I did go in. It is obvious to me now that what I was doing is I was desperate to find, how could I define my masculinity outside of the desires of someone else? And so that's the moment. That's one of the first moments I can think of. But if it wasn't until there was a guy named Nathaniel that I met when I was 19, and he's the first person who had the guts to say, "I think you're not straight. I'm not either, and that's okay." And he's like, "I know you're a Christian. Me too. It's okay. Can I buy you coffee?" And I let him buy me coffee. And that moment is the one that kind of upset all of my normal, because I felt comfortable with somebody. And it broke a lot of things because I'd internalized that gay is only effeminate and effeminate is bad for men. I'd internalized that because every time I was called gay, it was whenever I was doing something they thought a woman would do. And it was never a compliment. And so how could I be something that was antithetical to everything I'm supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
I started crumbling. I started breaking. And it would not be until I auditioned for this movie called Before the Fall. I did a little bit of acting. There's this movie called Before the Fall. It was gay pride and prejudice in Appalachia. That's what it was. Fantastic story. And I got to be in the room with the writer, because the writer was part of this like acting club that I was a part of when I was like in my early 20s. And I got to be in the first read through, and I was one of the two gentlemen who at the very end we're supposed to have this impassioned kiss. And I showed up every day except for the last day when they were supposed to have the impassioned kiss. And I think that's the day I really admitted to myself that this is something that I was afraid that I was afraid of something that seemed true. So I guess that's the longest way of saying, yeah, it's learning that I can still be all these things I would consider masculine while also being this thing that I was taught could only be feminine. Started breaking down the whole worldview. It destroyed everything that I thought I understood about being a man or being whatever I am in this body. Like I'm still trying to figure that out. That I can be in some kind of quantum flux between masculine and feminine at all times, and it can be defined outside of other people's desires, and also in response to other people's desires, and that can also be fun. And so, yeah, whatever sense you make of that.
That was a beautiful answer, which is right at the perfect time for us to move to the second guest, and we will get back to this whole conversation. I will send you back to the waiting room for you to relax. I'm sure you need to stretch your legs because it looks like you're on the floor there.
I am. I'm comfortable, but yes, I'll definitely stretch.
Okay, go stretch and be a good boy in doing so.
I'll do that. I will most certainly do that.
I'll see you back in about 15 minutes, my love.
Sounds good.
That was Andrew, red_sage01. I believe that is the actual screen name. I love Andrew. He's fantastic. And next we are bringing on Dr. James Stein, fantastic other content creator on TikTok and other places. Fantastic creator. So let's bring him on out, shall we? Mr. Stein, how are you doing, my love?
Oh, I'm good. I was just answering student emails on my phone while I waited.
It sounds like a joy of a day.
Oh, always, especially when it snows at 9 a.m. and then there's no trace of snow later that afternoon. The weather here really does gaslight you. It's
It sounds like
doing
Texas,
something.
but most Texas gaslight you, so I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, that's fair. Utah, same deal.
So should I call you Dr. Stein or James? Which would you prefer to be addressed as?
I usually prefer James, but if there's like a very important moment where you need to like lean in close to the mic, you can gesture the title for dramatic fashion. If need
I
be.
shall do that. Well, James, tell me about yourself. How young are you? And give me a little bit of your backstory.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I just celebrated my 33rd birthday, which means that I am halfway toward being a senior citizen. And take that with what you will. So I'm 33. I am a professor at a moderately, medium-sized university in southern Utah. That's not where I'm from, though. I'm from New Jersey. Spent the first 24 years of my life there. It's where I went to college and got my master's degree at Rutgers. And then I flew all the way to Tempe, Arizona to get my doctoral degree from Arizona State. So I'm a Sun Devil. That's the general flair of my academic side, but my personal life story is a little less smooth. It's a little more bumpy, as one might expect. So we can get into that if you want to. I don't know what direction you'd prefer to go in.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because the discussion's about what it's like, what it means to be a man, and deconstructing toxic masculinity. So let's go a little bit into that personal, shall we?
Okay, well, let me say this. I'm very ready for this conversation because I just finished listening to part 4 of the Andrew Tate saga from one of my favorite podcasts, Behind the Bastards, with Robert Evans. Ooh. So I just a quick plug. I have no affiliation with him. I just like his content. He's a journalist and a good one at that. So I can start in the same place that most white cisgendered men start, which is I was raised in a quote unquote fiscally conservative but socially liberal home. Now, what that meant was that between the ages of like 9 and 15, it was Rush Limbaugh on radio during the day, and Sean Hannity at night. Used to be Hannity and Coles, turned into the Hannity Show at night. Bill O'Reilly, the O'Reilly Factor, turned into Tucker Carlson. These are the shows that played just in the background noise of my mind. And as a young boy, that sort of thing kind of sinks in real quick and real deep, and you don't really even know what's happening. So I had a lot of not good beliefs, because it's not like I was taught to be, racist or homophobic per se, but it's something it's like a stew that you cook in for your whole life, right? It's like the boiling frog analogy, right? You turn the heat up higher and higher. So my own personal journey started when I was like 17. It was the first time I unlearned something. And at the time, I was very anti-gay marriage. And for the record, like, don't even talk about non-binary or trans people. This was not even a twinkle in my eye at that time. So there was gay and there was not gay, and that's where I lived. And I'll never forget, I was downtown. I got into like an argument with one of my best friends about it because he was in favor of gay marriage. And our mutual friend was there, and she really didn't want to pick a side. She just wanted us to stop arguing. And then after it was over, she like went up to me and was like, why are you so against this? And I truly and sincerely had no answer for her. I was like, well, it's something about like, it corrupts the name of marriage. And she's like, well, so you think gay people are corrupted? And I was like, no, of course not. And then I was like, oh dear. Oh no.
Extravagant and wild, and can make things just like over the top. Anything I can think of, anything that I personally want to do, where I'm able to do there.
From that moment on, it was, okay, yeah, I'm fine with this now. And that was like step 1 of 100 million en route to another 100 million more. But just to color that context a little bit more, in 2012, I'll never forget, I was in a Krausers, which is like a 7-Eleven on the East Coast. I was in a Krausers buying Muddy Buddies. And I looked up and they were playing Fox News. And I saw they were interviewing Donald Trump. And I remember this is 2012. And I remember thinking, you know who would make a good president? That guy. And these are the thoughts of somebody with no education or experience or wherewithal in the area of politics. But, and this is what my girlfriend tells me all the time, it's just the audacity to say, I know he'd make a good president because of course I do. And so the actual real unlearning, it didn't start until I moved to Arizona. I went to graduate school. And so we're talking about 9 years ago, if I'm being generous, is when I started reading articles that came from the critical paradigm, and I started interacting with people who had a different life from me, and they told me their story. So like the power of narrative mixed with the historical and sociocultural prowess of these very detailed articles slowly but surely morphed my opinion about what, not just, political ideology, but like what does it actually mean to be a man in terms of what have I been taught? Very little. What do I want to be? No idea. And where do I go from here? And I think it's that last question of like, where do I go from here that a lot of people get stuck in. Because for me, I was asking that question as somebody who was preparing to be a professor. So I kind of knew where I was going. But there are so many young men between the age of like 15 and 25 who ask themselves that question, and they look around and they go, oh, I don't know. Where am I supposed to go? Someone needs to show me where to go. And that is, of course, when you get caught up in like the aesthetics of a guy like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, the list goes on and on and on, who offer them a relatable face. They see themselves in this person, and then a specific ideology that they can latch onto and relate to. And I'll be honest, if Andrew Tate was around when I was like 14, 15, I probably would have thought he was funny. I probably would have been into it. Not because I was like overtly misogynistic, but because young men are really vulnerable and moldable at that point in time. So yeah, all that to say, I think like my own personal journey is one that has really not even been going on for that long, and therefore has a long way to go. But ultimately, colors the way that I see other people who have these predispositions of what does it mean to be a man. I feel like I can kind of relate to them. And that's why, when I was active on social media, I was often talking to people in the way that I would have wanted to talk to myself when I was younger and a bit more naive.
And I actually try to do the same thing in terms of whenever I create content as well. And that's one of the reasons I appreciated everything you've done. I thought it'd be a great talking place. What are some of the things that you've had to continually unlearn? What is a current or what, better yet, what does being a man mean to you?
Well, I'll answer both parts of the question. I'll give you a tangible example of it first. Because a lot of people will be like, I did it. I'm a feminist. I did it. I'm done. But that's not how learning works. You must unlearn constantly. And I have the benefit of having a very outspoken, powerful, intelligent, significant other who does this all the time and teaches me, despite, right, I'm the one with the doctorate in the relationship. But she teaches me things all the time simply because she exists on a plane that I don't. And so things that are just there for her need to be told to me. For example, sometimes, and I'll say this myself, sometimes people will say this thing where they are talking about a problematic behavior and they'll be like, I hate when white women do this. And she'll always question me. She'll be like, are you saying that you hate white women and just inserting the word white so that you can be misogynistic? And I'm like, no, I'm definitely not doing that. And then when we talk, I'm like, oh no, maybe I'm doing that. So like, it's really interesting how like you can unlearn things in multiple ways, from multiple levels, from multiple sources. That's kind of the point. If you ask me, what does it mean to be a man? I think that's an entirely subjective definition, which is probably how we got into the position that we find ourselves in. For me, being a man means being truthful with yourself. Being a man means doing what's right. And being a man means understanding the role that you play in terms of healing society and in terms of acknowledging your own faults. And I think that all of those things take a lot of the traditionally masculine characteristics that most people like really try to brag about. Power, patience, influence, like these things, it's easier to unlearn and do these things if you have all of that. And so for many people, that struggle is deeper because of their lack of privilege.
And I fully agree about that. And then going from there in this process, what are some things that are quote unquote feminine about yourself that you've come to love and appreciate?
Yeah, this is actually something that I do with my students quite often, where we talk about the characteristics of masculinity and femininity, because that's really all they are.
Yeah.
Feminine characteristics for me, I view nurturing, caregiving, empathizing, the ability to practice patience and control one's tendency toward outburst, and to harness one's emotional intelligence, which itself is an extremely complex phenomenon. But the idea of controlling your emotions is this hyper masculine way of just saying, if you're stoic, you are the master of your own emotions. But part of being emotionally intelligent means understanding when it's time to emote.
And even a big part of Stoicism, the actual teaching, does acknowledge the fact that you have to feel those negative inherent feelings first, but acknowledge what you cannot change about certain situations. And people often forget about that when they talk.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, me personally, I'm not an especially expressive person. The only time I'm really expressive is when I'm like playing sports or teaching. Oh yeah, so I play professional cross country wiffle ball. Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole community, and I get very passionate there. But when I get passionate with my dogs too. But when I'm if I'm in an argument with my girlfriend, or if there's a moment of intense concentration, I tend to probably as a result of my attachment style, I'm a little bit detached as an attachment style. I tend to hold it in, and that's partly because I've been trained to do that. But even that, there's a difference between like feeling an emotion and expressing an emotion. And so if you get to this point where you're trying to stop yourself from feeling emotions, you're probably in a really bad space. And the expression of emotion, that's a completely different thing. But it's this idea, it's like of toxic stoicism, where you forget that part of being stoic means acknowledging that your emotions are real and worth feeling.
And I see your baby right there as well.
Oh yeah, Goose is having a good old time.
And that's a fantastic way to put all of this into just a wonderful little nutshell, a little bow, and a little gift to discuss that. And what is something that you have discovered of yourself that you did not realize of self before you started your journey on trying to deconstruct some of that toxic masculinity? What is something that you've discovered since then of yourself?
One of the big things I've learned is that, well, let me do two things. On like the more important scale, I've learned that audacity is the best thing I can do in my journey toward allyship. I can leverage my audacity in some really truly insanely powerful ways to just help other folks. Another thing that I've learned, a smaller thing that I've learned, is that I really enjoy like home decor, which I think that like that's one of those things that like people will be like, oh, that's for the women to do. And like, no, I'm allowed to have, men are allowed to have taste. I'm allowed to have taste. And so, at the very least, I like, I'm fortunate enough to be a homeowner. And when I was, putting my house together, I was able to set a tone for the space in which I live, which is like, in my opinion, so important. And it's a very privileged thing to be able to do, but it's still so important, because if you're just staring at four walls, like if you've seen like the meme of like POV, you go back to his house after a night at the bar and it's like a mattress and a TV and like one folding chair. Like, you know what I mean? Like that it's just harmful to self-growth if you look at that every day. Like exterior beauty can help to manifest one's internal beauty in many ways.
And I fully embrace that. And obviously you've gotten very good taste, considering how well you've positioned every single book on that shelf behind you.
Oh, I'm very proud of these books. My parents got these books back in the 80s and 90s. They're all leather bound. I just finally got my hands on them. And so the first thing I did is my birthday. So I asked for a bookshelf for my birthday, and now they're up. And I love walking past them every day. I love it.
And it's beautiful. And happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You're only a year younger than me. Well, probably a year and a half, about to be, I think, 35 if I did my math right. I'm not even 100% sure of my own age, but that is going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah, that's how you know. That's how you can tell we're starting to get up there, because we keep forgetting how old we are. I swear I'm 28.
I swear I'm 28 when I'm drinking, and then I remember the day after that I am absolutely not 28.
Yep.
And dude, yesterday was painful, and I was like, please let me be healed tomorrow, because I went and drank for 15 hours straight, and choices were made. At least I didn't do anything that I remember untoward. So that's been
that's good. Oh, and if we're talking about masculinity, by the way, this is like one of my biggest brags. I went to Rutgers for college, which is a rough party school. Like when I say I mean it's like a dirty party school. It's grody. But I take like great pride in being able to reflect back, because I've never blacked out once. I take great pride in being able to reflect back on my time in college and know with immense certainty that neither myself or any of the men in my friend group ever abused or harmed or intimidated or threatened a woman. We were so not about that, even during a time where, for example, I would have thought that Donald Trump would make a good president. It was it's a really good thing to be able to look back on and think about. I would encourage, I would hope that all young men can look back on their college days or their high school days or their young adulthood and have that same confidence and like good feeling. Like we did dumb things, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh.
But never did we any sort of behavior that would be even remotely considered close to abuse or assault or harassment of any kind.
That's fantastic. I mean, I will acknowledge that I had some blackout moments, but I had a team corralling me at all times, because I had a tendency to disappear if not.
Oh, you were that friend. I had a friend like that too, who just vanishes.
I've always been very. We're not gonna. This is not about me. Anyway, shall we bring on Andrew? We should bring back on.
We shall. Yes.
I went to school at a part of school, Texas A&M Corpus, and we were the theater arts department. And so our parties were all weekend long. Welcome back, Andrew. I'm glad to have you back. How was your break?
Oh, it was fantastic. I did everything I was told to do.
Except for the wardrobe change.
Except for the wardrobe change.
I can make that happen right. I got a duster on that. You know what?
There he goes.
I love it. If I had a moment, I would have gone to do a quick costume change, but I am trapped.
Wow! Ooh. Look at that, a whole new man.
Look at that, entirely different.
Lovely.
Vibe.
Look at this.
I love that.
That is nice. I love that. Yeah.
Welcome back. We've had a fantastic conversation between James and I, and Andrew and I. So now let's have a conversation between both of you, shall we? Now, it's been a very long time since I've had to have this type of conversation with two men at one time, but let's get into it. So Andrew discussed religion in his course of his exploration of masculinity and how that played a role. How much has religion or background of that nature played a role in both of your perspective of masculinity and that journey? Who wants to go first, or do y'all want to talk amongst yourselves?
I have some initial thoughts. James, do you want to go, or?
No, you lead the way.
Okay, so the two paths, the two through lines that I think of first is how, regardless of what the cultures that the Bible is written in had to say about masculinity of my regional upbringing became associated with godliness. So like the ideal, the godly way of being would have been like any average man, but just a little bit better, right? What the better would not have been away from their masculinity. It would have been from some kind of vice or some kind of pride or some kind of thing. The other through line would be, while in seminary, I got to get a better picture of how the Torah talks about the nature of God and how that differs so drastically from the masculinity of my upbringing. And yet most people that read that do not care. They kind of imbue their own masculinity onto God, because they associate God exclusively as masculine. So I guess those are two through lines. To summarize that, I guess, is masculinity was considered holy in my upbringing, and then when I learned enough to show that maybe that wasn't right, no one seemed to care, because patriarchy was a stronger domineering tool that spoke through religion rather than religion speaking through patriarchy, I guess. Is what I might say. James, I spoke for longer than I intended. You go right ahead.
Well, so my experience was pretty much the exact opposite. I was raised without religion.
Okay.
Like, and I don't mean that my parents were like, we are atheists. Like, what I mean is that I would get regular sit downs from them where they were like, now we don't practice religion in this house, but if someday you want to explore it, you're more than welcome to. It was that kind of thing, which is ironic because my parents are the ones who converted to Presbyterianism, while I deviated towards Satanism. And so
there's a smidgen of difference there. I mean, you have to hold your head sideways, but there's
a slight difference there. But it's so interesting because, when I grew up, I was taught that if you are the type of person to like do Pentecostal preaching or like the Joel Osteens of the world, like I was taught that those are just grifters, like they're just con men. And so I grew up my whole life knowing, oh, you're a con man. Oh, you're a grifter. Oh, obviously, who doesn't know that? But that colored my perception of masculinity, because to me, now here in my 33-year-old body, I see men like that, and to me that it's the opposite of masculinity. It's fear mongering, it's outrage porn, it's cowardice in to me, right? And so for me, I'm like, oh, none of these things are masculine. These are all they're not feminine either. They're just there, uninspired, unoriginal. Same thing has been going on since 1,500 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. So it was always so clear and obvious to me. But it wasn't until I forced myself to look into the priorities and the viewpoints of folks who grow up believing these things that I understood kind of what Andrew was saying about the inextricable intertwining of masculinity and godliness. And so that, in terms of, you talk about like unlearning stuff, like for me, that took me forever to understand. It was so hard for me to wrap my head around that because of how clearly I was instructed from childhood not to trust that sort of, fear mongering.
That's incredible. It's interesting to hear you say it like that, because you got the chance to hear this from the outside.
Yeah.
I kind of did a little bit, but not entirely. The church movement I was a part of was independent Christian, and so it had a view of denominations and like Pentecostals, Baptists, and various others as the as kind of like the whack jobs of it all. It's just like those are the judgmental ones. Those
right.
are the sensationalist ones. We're the rational ones.
That's exactly what my parents say. That's exactly what, they're not like us. They're nothing like us, which is so interesting because it's true in many ways. But it's kind of like when people say like, well, I'm not racist. I just voted for Trump. And it's like, yeah, well, who did all the white supremacists vote for? The same one you voted for. Don't you think there might be some unpacking to do there? That kind of thing.
All of that. Yes. So there were certain things that I was able to see from that perspective, saying that kind of Christianity is a problem. And whatever was considered that kind, the box got bigger and bigger as I grew up. But I could not escape the as you said it so well, the inextricable intertwining of it. It's almost like Christian was a trait looked for in a good, to tie us back to heteronormativity, a good partner for a woman was a Christian man. Like he needed to also be Christian among these other traits. Otherwise, he wasn't bring home material. And so that was another part of the valuing. It is like godliness must be attached to masculinity. Heteronormativity must be attached to masculinity, and viability within a monogamous like marital structure, seeking the 2.5 kids and a white picket fence, that also has to be tied to masculinity.
The nuclear family. Yeah.
Now,
Exactly.
does the 0.5 mean literal, or does that include the dog?
Well, there's this guy named King Solomon, and he had this great idea. That was the average of the time, right? It was like on average, a U.S. household had 2.5 kids. I forget where that might just be a cliche at this point.
Oh no, I think so too. But I remember it too. Thankfully, I was technically there were 2 children. I was the only child. My brother, only brother my mother had, is 19 years older than me.
Wow.
Yeah, he's an Xer. My mother's a boomer. That is interesting too. And so for y'all, that is another way that also plays into masculinity, the differentiation of the parents, because some people at our age group were raised by Gen Xers. I was raised by a boomer, which is
same.
She's 71, I think. Yes, she was born 51. I'm not good at math. I am not good at math. Nor do I.
My father's nearly the same age, so.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents are right around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of us were raised by boomers, so that is a very interesting. I've met a few friends that were raised by Gen Xers, and they're like, "Oh, is that your grandmother?" I'm like, "That's my mother." Oh. That is my mother. That's okay. Are y'all also being racist because she could have had me significantly earlier? Is that? I didn't. Sorry, way off track. And I know we brought it up a couple times before, so I'm going to circle way back. And we've mentioned Andrew Tate, not Andrew here. How do you think boys and young men wind up sucked into that Andrew? Because all 3 of us can look at it from here and just be like, he's such a loser. I mean, that's the way I say, man. He's such a loser. Like,
yeah.
Period. But how do you think young men and boys wind up just getting sucked down into that?
I have a working hypothesis here.
Go ahead.
I think that for Andrew Tate to exist, there must be an incel community. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase from what I was telling you, that 4-part series by Robert Evans, Behind the Bastards, on Andrew Tate here. But while listening to that, I really thought a lot about the difference between a guy like Tate and Jordan Peterson. Tate is obviously further down the pipeline. Jordan Peterson creates incels, right? He snatches them out of in a vulnerable time and ultimately teaches them to do the things that will isolate them. Andrew Tate needs that group. Without that group, he doesn't exist, because he needs a group of nihilistic, self-hating, bordering on self-harm or harming others type of men, so that he can grab them by the cheeks and look them in the eye and say, no, you've got to get a Bugatti. And if you don't have a Bugatti, so like, and when you get to that level of intensity, it becomes very easy. You look at Andrew Tate, he's talking very loudly. There's a heuristic overload happening here. You get emotional flooding, emotional contagion, and it gives you a sugar high. It gives you a temporary high of adrenaline, which you connect to this idea of being violent and masculine. And although most of the people who listen to Andrew Tate are not going to do violence against women because they've been listening to Andrew Tate, they're desensitized to it, which is a huge problem, because then when a guy like Andrew Tate gets arrested for human trafficking, well, the Matrix got him. It's not he committed a bunch of crimes and will be serving time in Romanian prison. It's he predicted it. The Matrix got him. Like, no, the police raided his house 6 months before they arrested him. He knew it was coming. But they allow themselves to believe that sort of thing because he catches them at such a vulnerable point and inserts his personality into them. So that's my long-winded way of hypothesizing how this happens to so many young impressionable men.
I go ahead.
That's so interesting. So it's obvious that it wasn't until you said it that the dots kind of connected for me, like what this has always felt like, and it's this kind of like white knuckling of a way of being a man. It's like, at least it's what it feels like. It's and every step down the ladder or up the ladder, depending on how you look at it, I guess, is a further clinching on to, no, I'm going to hold on to this way of being for dear life. Because this insufferable, emotionally constipated, overly loquacious kind of like, I am this way and this is the way I should be and everyone should be like me, and in a world where people like me are in charge, everything's good. And when you sell that to someone that's never had power, it's sexy. I could see that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And to see that as a trickle down from one to the other is just like when the rubber meets the road on the Jordan Peterson story and it doesn't deliver, you need either to divert from it and go a different direction, or you need something that you can hold on to a little tighter. Mm-hmm. Perhaps something more aggressive, perhaps something more violent. Like we all do this with different ideologies. I mean, this isn't a unique thing. It's just particularly obvious to us, right? Like we all have a cognitive dissonance of some kind of way of being, and in this case, I guess I hadn't noticed that each of these are kind of like boss levels on what, you know what I mean? Like the first Pokemon gym is not Jordan Peterson, but maybe he's the third, right? And you got to be a certain level of self-loathing and angry and hold on and level up to that point to beat that gym. But you can't make it to the fourth gym at the same level. You can't do it. You got to level up. Something's got to happen to you along the way. It's all about making sense of a world that everything they've been handed doesn't make sense anymore, does it? Mm-hmm. And you just need someone confident enough and loud enough and projecting a certain kind of success enough, and that's all it takes. But it's getting harder and harder, isn't it?
Yeah,
because the world's falling apart for men like that, and so it's not aggressive enough.
What's so interesting though about Tate is that he and this was something, again, not to continue calling back to Robert Evans, I just don't want to make it sound like it's an original thought when it's not. He dabbles in left-wing ideology. Like if you listen to some of the things that he says, he'll talk about how capitalism is a scam and all the billionaires, it's a class war and they're all against you and us and even me, even though I'm rich, I'm not as rich as them. And so then he takes a right turn, right? Instead of saying we should dismantle the system, right? Instead of saying we should dismantle the system that's creating poverty by necessity, he goes, you got to scam the scammers and I'll teach you how to do it as long as you give me money, which again, to me is like, he just told you to scam the scammers and then asked you for money. Like, shouldn't you be able to make that connection? But no, especially not when, if you're anything like me growing up, it wasn't me putting $29.99 into Andrew Tate's Discord. That was my parents' credit card. They weren't asking a whole lot of questions. You know what I mean?
Right.
Except with me, it was RuneScape. With me, it was RuneScape. I was trying to play RuneScape. I wasn't trying to. I love
RuneScape.
Yeah, I love RuneScape too. And then eventually you have to pay to play. But the only difference there is that I was doing nerd stuff and not learning about how to treat women like objects. That's literally, it could have been anything, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And so in the vein of this conversation, how would you redirect, or what would you recommend to redirect boys and young men that are currently in this kind of sphere or on that, I guess, the pipeline? What would you tell loved ones that are maybe watching this, that see their loved one going down that path? What can be done to help or to redirect them back to a way that's more healthy for their development? What would you two think or say?
So, one of the directions I think this conversation could go is I have a marketing thing to say and then a relationship thing to say.
Go ahead.
I don't think in this moment, the way that we navigate relationships in our capitalist society equips us to outmarket good marketers.
Mm-hmm.
There is more rhetoric being thrown at these young men at a faster rate than I can develop a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
The wall becomes so high so fast, and I have to get past. They're still on autopilot when I start talking to them. All they're doing is espousing and regurgitating the rhetoric that they've been given, because he has had more time to say more things to them and feed them more arguments than I can ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's just like with marketing, you know, when there's too many billboards and there's too many advertisements, the wall is so high that people don't even really unglaze their eyes when they look at the poster board anymore, you know? Mm-hmm. I think that's what's happening with a lot of this rhetoric. It's hitting so fast and so long, and it gives a better high, as James said, right? Than a relationship with me could ever give, unless I'm there for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the problems, is we don't get past the rhetoric. We can't get past the fight with half of the people we talk to, and they're just on autopilot. They're not even trying to fight with us. They're just parroting. I think the only thing that can fix that is the thing that gave James something that wasn't Andrew Tate, and the thing that gave me something that wasn't depression and self-harm. I needed theater. That was a community that I had. It was an actual living community that let me exist among them and function and breathe and grow. For James, I'm sure it wasn't just RuneScape, but he had an outlet where he got to do something socially with other people, right? He had a social avenue for social relationship. I think that a lot of these young men have not been equipped in society for appropriate relationships, first of all. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to blame everybody for someone's problems, but we stopped figuring out how to do relationships well long before this moment.
Oh God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, like, it is so much easier to get a high from a screen than it is to develop to do this, what we're doing in this moment. And so the marketing's the problem. I think the relationships are the answer. To be in a community where you can exist, period, that could turn you another direction. I know that doesn't give the exact answer, but I don't see a way around it without tearing past the marketing through some kind of relationship. And that's going to take a fuck ton of time. I don't know. Yeah, the end.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what you said in different words. I'm going to start with a joke. I want to go with 3 different levels of methodology. The first is the individual level. That's the joke, I promise. Then I want to talk about the relational level, and then I want to talk about the societal level. For me, and this is just for me, the more... am I allowed to swear?
Of course.
I said fuck ton. I hope so.
Yeah, no, this is for YouTube. We can talk about a lot of things are not community guidelines.
Okay, good. So just to be totally blunt, the more I was fucking, the less misogynistic I became. Straight up and down. I find that with rare exception, real, actually, if the more times you experiment with new lovers or the same lover, the more you realize that everything that's coming out of the mouth of a guy like Andrew Tate is fairy tale nonsense. Mm-hmm. And that there may be, some women who enjoy or who put up with perhaps that level of abuse. The impossibly large majority of men and women don't want to be treated that way, right? And you learn that by having intimate interactions with people, specifically sex. And so, like, as I dated more fervently, I realized that, like,
is that what we're calling it now?
I don't know, but when I went through my fuckboy phase, like, one of the big things that it taught me was that...
What do you want to say?
Yeah, when I went through that phase, it really did teach me that, like, there's no such thing as spit and game. Like, women just see right through that dumb shit. Sometimes they'll have sex with you anyway if you're cute, but then they won't hit you back up. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I don't know. It's like the idea of game where it's like, oh, you can't let her know that you just want to have sex. Yes, you can. You absolutely can, and you should. And you should, because if you got it like that, you're probably getting laid anyway. So that's the individual level. Like if you act that way, it's probably just evidence that you are lonely and not experienced in that field. The relational level, which is a little bit more serious, and this is part of what I really wanted to do during my time on social media, was not necessarily, partly speak to these young men, but also train the people around them in how to approach these young men via the Socratic method. Understand what they're about to say, understand why it's a fallacy, and know where to locate information that can debunk what they're saying, because maybe they won't listen to me, but they might listen to their sibling, they might listen to their friend or their significant other if they're saying the same or similar things, in a way that, because if you have a relationship with this young man, you might be able to reach him in a way that, an influencer or a talking head on TikTok simply can't do. So I think that Socratic method of question asking is really big at the relational level. So if you see someone going through that, work to be patient with them, And then finally at the societal level, it's one of the big things that we can do to solve this is one of the same things that we can do to solve the crime issues that we have in densely populated metropolitan areas, which is make more social programs, like make government, state, local funded social programs. I made 12 friends in Little League. Was I good at baseball? No. I was 4'6". I was 4'6" and I was 70 pounds. I could barely lift the bat, but it didn't matter because my friends were playing and I was playing. We were all having fun and we had good coaches who understood that the purpose of Little League was to have fun and make friends, not to win the game. So if we craft more social programs like that, it will give the necessary sense of community that ultimately stops people from those feelings of isolation that ultimately guide them toward a guy like Andrew Tate. And that, like Andrew said, it's a multi-generational fix. That does not happen tomorrow, next week, next year. It takes decades. So I don't know if we're going to do that, but I think it's the biggest solution.
I hope. Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, there's an element there that I didn't think about until you said it, and to say it differently than I think you did, which is when you have community, you have so much less need for language of power on the individual scale.
Sure.
These people keep talking about power as an individual. You don't need that as there's no such thing as individual power, like, right? There's like large amounts of organized money, large amounts of organized people. You can placate the systems of power and have favor within them, but an individual rarely has like legit like the ability to help her on a grand scale unless they have large amounts of organized money or the backing of large amounts of organized people. So on that level of relationship where you already have freely the thing that they're selling, that these guys are selling, which is relationship, you no longer need the illusion of a power structure to manipulate or to take or to learn or to like trick. Like, you don't need that power skill set to dominate someone else into giving you what you want if it's being given freely. I hadn't considered how social programs play into that, but they absolutely do. When we have those programs in place, relationships come freely. You don't have to learn how to like win them or dominate them or grab them, and that's brilliant. It fixes a lot of problems that lead to people feeling powerless.
But I think the best part about that is it can be started tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, if you or someone you know is going through one of these issues, you can start helping them to unlearn tomorrow. You can't create Little League in your town tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, you can't create a theater program in your community. You can try and start tomorrow, but it won't be there tomorrow. Whereas the conversation can actually physically happen tomorrow. And I think that that's big because we need short and long-term solutions.
Right. A triage and a new hospital.
Right.
Yeah. And so let's go to something that's a little bit more fun. And I asked the question of James, but Andrew, what is something that is quote unquote considered feminine that you have come to enjoy?
What is something that is considered feminine that I've come to enjoy? Probably this is gonna sound terrible. Self-care. Like I hate to say it that way, but like, I mean, the amount of men that just like don't celebrate hygiene and caring for themselves, like talking.
I am learning that on TikTok. I am learning about how men don't wash their ass.
It's a whole thing. Like, I have always like long ago, I would find myself envious of women or more outwardly or overtly gay men, as however you would determine that, who would celebrate their looks or their shoes or their clothes or their makeup or their skincare routines, and it's these like smaller, how easy it is to celebrate yourself, and how often masculinity teaches young men they're not allowed to. And so I guess actually my answer is celebrating myself, like to delight in these little moments of like self-care and enjoyment, and with that, you know, dabbling in makeup, dabbling in nail polish, dabbling in all these things that are considered effeminate, but like that kind of self-care and celebrating it is something that I've learned to let myself have.
That's
I love painting my nails, but because I'm such like a big, strong alpha male, whenever I go, no, but this is for realsies though. Whenever I go to the gym and I'm lifting weights, which is not something I do much more than a couple times a week because I try to diversify my exercise. But when I'm lifting weights, I think something about the way that I grip the weights makes the gel chip. Like, like it's horrible. And like I can't, like I tried soft gel, I tried hard gel. I'm about to just do press-ons and then press off for the gym. Like,
so are you gripping like this? Are you gripping like this? Like with your thumbs under, like here?
I guess either under or over if I'm holding dumbbells, depending on the way that I'm.
Try a false grip, because it doesn't engage the ends of your fingers. Instead of gripping like this, turn your thumb up here. Grip like this. Well, because you can't engage these last muscles here, and so you can't turn your fingers under when you do a false grip.
Oh, maybe I'll just do that. I'd have to drop weight, but
well, I mean, you are just as strong on pull movements from a false grip as you are.
Right.
So.
Oh, maybe I'll give that a try. I'm going to have to, here's what I'm going to do. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to do an experimental design, because there's no way for me not to turn this into an academic activity. I'll get a fresh coat of like powder dip, and then I'll do a traditional grip with one hand and a false grip with the other hand. And I'll see if one hand chips and the other one does not.
I'm so excited for this.
I need to know the outcome, because I have the problem. I just switched to powerlifting.
Good for you.
Which, thank you. I am exceedingly strong. I just reached my first PR of 245 on my bench. So
nice.
That's wonderful.
It's intense. It's intense. But
do you hold on? Do you do PRs like that, like in the hat and the dress? Because that would be the best sight ever. That would break every Andrew Tate fan. I need to watch you humiliate their max in a dress. Am I wrong?
I need to do that.
I don't think you're wrong.
Because I go for comfort, so I look, and people have seen me, and I feel so sorry for these people that wind up running into me at the grocery store after I left the gym, because I am in like a muscle shirt and shorts, and I am disgusting. I am the epitome of disgusting. And they're like, "Oh my God, Stein!" I'm like, "Fuck, I forgot my mask. Hi." It's not because I don't want you to hug me. It's just I am exceedingly gross, and we're not in the right environment. This can be, you know what? Let's not talk about some of the communities I'm a part of. But it's been one of the most interesting things is the fact that. But I should talk to my trainer who's been teaching me powerlifting. She's a lesbian, very, very butch. We joke about it, but she's this tall, and I'm 5'4", and she's this tall on me.
Wow.
And I adore her, and she would probably die laughing. Just me walking in full gown, just like, video it. Let's go.
That would be, I feel like if you did that, like, you know, like the thing where like someone like posts an exceedingly rude comment, making an assumption about you that's like demonstrably false. Like if you wait for the right comment about somebody calling you like too effeminate or something like that, and then reply to that comment with you doing like 215 for reps in a dress, you know what I mean? Like I just feel like the virility of a post like that would be unmatched.
Oh yeah, and I've been wanting to do it. It's just like I forget that my phone exists. I am a horrible quote unquote influencer. Like I rarely create content outside these four walls. And then, because then I'll be at the gym, because I go with my trainer once a week, and then 5 days a week I work out by myself. But I'll see these guys at like 4 p.m. with like a tripod and like a full setup, and I'm like, it is 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. You are creating like I'm not gonna shoot down the hustle. However, it is 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I need that fucking machine. Anyway, so I'll just walk over and like, hey, how many more reps do you have? Oh, do you want me to pick down the weight? No, can you add more? That'd be great. Thank you.
I will say it is an absolute like I work out at the same time as most of the like veterans at my gym, and it is fun with this hair, and usually in like mid-thigh shorts. I have to, if I don't want to lay on my hair, I'll put up a top knot and then I'll bench from there. And the top knot is still not exactly the most masculine thing to some people. And so I'll have like this big old gold nose ring or some gold earrings, and then I'll have like mid-thigh shorts and a top knot benching. And it's a fun time.
I will say it was interesting because I did have small fake pointed nails, press-ons. Like they were a little coffin, like they were barely a pip. But there was power in having those long nails. I hated them. I hated having them because I'm very practical in terms of things I do. But working out with them, I was like, okay, let's do this. And once I was like, I hope that didn't hit anybody. That is no longer a me problem. But I do get looks. I'll forget that I'm wearing this, or I'll wear an earrings, and then of course I normally have these all painted. But it is interesting. But I'm in San Antonio, and we're very liberal city, and the Gold's gym I go to is a lot of gays go there. It's the second gay gym in the city. The first one's the other Golds off of I-10 and 410. Evidently, I don't care. I just don't want people to look at me while I'm working out. Let me finish. So in this wonderful conversation, my patrons get to ask questions of my guests. And we have 3 fantastic questions from some of my patrons. And to anybody watching or listening to this, if you'd like to ask questions of our future guests, feel free to become a patron on my Patreon at patreon.com/ShineandNathan for as low as $3 a month. So now let's get into these beautiful questions, shall we? Now, this first one is from Heather, and my own handwriting sucks. So, is it becoming more acceptable for men to be emotionally vulnerable and supportive in their friendships with each other? I find many men I know are only vulnerable emotionally with their romantic partners, and therefore wind up alone if the loss of that partner were to ever happen. Gentlemen?
I could start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think in a couple of ways, Heather almost answered their own question there with this idea of like, it is, but only to an extent. I think that the jig is up in terms of men understanding, heterosexual men understanding that the women who they end up in relationships with want somebody who's going to be vulnerable with them and want somebody who's going to be real with them. But I do not think that has yet bled into platonic friendships or, and perhaps more importantly, professional relationships. And I'll speak anecdotally. the study of communication is a female-dominated field. Still have men though, right? And so when men participate in my class, they are a little bit more timid than I might expect men to be. And I think part of the reason of that is because they're really afraid that if they say something silly or sensitive or vulnerable, that this large classroom filled with mostly women will judge them or not like them. And it never happens, right? It never happens. And so by the end of the semester, people are much more open. But I think that what it really comes down to is taking that masculine risk of putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. And like, it's like when people say like, oh, nobody wants to date a girly man. Like, right? They say, it's like, who says that? Who says that? Is it other men who say that? Yeah, It's only other men who say that, right? So the practice of doing that assuages those doubts. I just don't think it's become mainstream at the level that folks like us might want it to be, or might see it as being in our community, in the larger community. I just don't think it's there yet, but I think it's moving in that direction slowly.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of things that you said, and I'll repeat some of them in my own words, but I also want to say something else from like a relationships within the church perspective and how that has affected some things. So I would agree that she kind of answered her own question, and yes, it is becoming more acceptable for men to be more intimate, especially in heteronormative relationships. I will say though that we are still copying a behavior that is reinforced by Christian hegemony, which is that the wife of the man is to be his everything, and so all the intimate needs and all the private relational needs and personal relational needs all get poured into this one person who is already being expected because of the patriarchal underpinnings to take care of everything. And so now she's also taking care of everything that her husband needs emotionally. So I think there is like this problem within the Christian reinforcement of heteronormative marriage. There's this great book about it that I've gotten to read again recently, recommended by a friend of mine, named All the Rage by Darcy Lockman. It talks about the gender imbalance that happens within the household between heteronormative couples. Great book. And so I do think that men are figuring out how to be more open and intimate, but I do think that there are ways that it can look like men are becoming more open and intimate when it's actually just a reinforcement of Christian hegemony on heteronormative relationships. Well, she's going to be my everything, and so I'm going to put all my intimacy into her, all my private needs, all my personal needs into her, instead of learning how to be more emotionally open with other people, which leads me into the church conversation. When you create church ministry, especially in evangelical circles, you're trying to create opportunities for people to feel emotional intimacy in large settings as fast as possible. In small groups, in worship services, in classroom settings, we want people to feel like they can express and bear their all to someone. And there is a reinforcement in that Christian structure of things going from social to intimate, fast, nothing in between. It's social, we're all here for a shared desire, and then it's intimate. You know deep things about my life, you know my struggles, my sins, and you're going to accept me for it. If it works right. So I think that depending on the circle, we are learning intimacy, but what we're not learning is how to delicately escalate relationships in healthy ways. To go from social to personal, where it's not about shared activity, it's about the person you're doing whatever with. From personal to private, now you know some of my stuff, we're not just doing things together because it's you. And then from private to intimate, and intimate not just being about sex. I don't think we've taught people how to escalate. I think at least in Christian circles, we've taught people how to go from social to intimate. And depending on how we use dating apps, from public to intimate. But we haven't taught people how to escalate effectively. It's becoming more common, but we don't have all the tools we need in our toolbox yet.
You know what this makes me think of? The end of the movie Step Brothers, when they hug. Do you know what I'm talking about?
And how awkward it's just like
when Will Ferrell and Adam Scott's characters hug, and it's like, and they finally hug. Like, that is where we're at right now. Men are finally acknowledging that they want to feel loved and they want to open up and they want to be vulnerable, but there's still a subsection being like, if I do that, the women will view me as less of a man and I'll never get into a relationship. But of course, again, the only people saying that are men. And I think Andrew made a really good point. What we would in the social sciences call an agentic friendship, which is like a task-oriented friendship. Like, those are still quite popular, but there are little rhetorical tricks that we can do to speed the process up. Like, for example, when I visit my friends from New Jersey, I make sure I always tell them that I love them when I leave. Love you guys, right? And these are platonic, heterosexual men who I'm friends with. And that little motion helps, I think.
I'm hoping.
And they say it back. They say it back. The first time my male friend told me he loved me was at his wedding. And it meant a lot to me. And I was like, that meant a lot to me. So I started saying it because it felt good to say it.
That's wonderful. Yeah. The invitation of like, it's not disclosure, reciprocity, is it? It's like when we're willing to give us something of ourselves, and that gives the invitation for someone to give the same back to us.
Yeah, that would just be disclosure, reciprocity for sure.
Yeah, so I love that. That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say I love you to my friends, but most of my male friends are gay. But I will agree with you, Andrew, in terms, especially also in gay relationships, because we are men. That is what we are in these relationships. There is that lack of that gentle escalation of, and especially today in current gay relationships, where in dating, sex does happen relatively early within the courtship process. And I'll admit, it does happen very quickly, but at least I'm very blunt about what I'm looking for in that moment. Like, However, I think there is that men go from, especially in the gay community, because we're still modeling certain things, our own relationship practices off of heteronormative relationship practices, in the fact that we do not have that gradual escalation in terms of courtship. In friendship, that kind of does exist, but it does typically happen very quickly because we do share a lot of information about each other, especially about our own sexual escapades, very quickly. But I actually was dating someone recently where we went from, I met him a couple dates. There was no sexual interaction because I was wanting to do things, try things differently than my previous courtships. But there was the level of emotional oomph he was wanting from me in terms of was exceedingly high after only met him twice, if that makes any sense. For me, I was like, I do not know you this well for me to being given this type of emotional, I guess not baggage per se, but this type of emotional oomph so quickly. But I've also gone through the last 2 years of exploring what it means to be alone and being left the fuck alone in terms of romance, not in terms of sex, but in terms of romance. And a lot of gay men don't necessarily do that escalation of, okay, we went on a date, we went here, now we're here, and now we're very intimate. It goes from point A to point Z exceedingly quickly. So I think that's something that a lot of just across the board should actually learn from.
It's complicated. I think the way that I was taught dating growing up was that you camp out in the social space for a really, really long time until you get to be in the intimate space. Mm-hmm. And I realize I'm using those terms very anecdotally, like where you camp out in a space where it doesn't actually have to do with the other person. It's just the shared activities until it can finally be proven to be something real through some kind of intimacy. Mm-hmm. Or something that might exist through like deep self-telling, like of giving of each other. And I wish someone would have told young me that there was this whole world in between those of where someone can deeply mean something to you for who they are, regardless of what the thing is, without you knowing their deepest, darkest secrets, without you sharing of yours, or without any like deep forms of sexual or intimate touch. Like there's a world now go for the sexual touch. I'm not criticizing that in the slightest.
No.
But there's this whole world in there that's also there to be enjoyed that really was never emphasized in the conversations about how I was taught to connect with someone.
Yeah, it's like a false binary that men are fed. Yeah,
I think you're right.
And I agree as well. Let's see, what is the next question? I kind of touched on this one earlier, but this is from Denise P. I wonder, how can we help young men realize that they aren't entitled to time or attention with anyone just because they think they want it? How can we help young men learn that?
I think practicing what is that called? Rejection therapy. That is a new term that I learned the other day from my girlfriend, of course, where you go somewhere with the intent of being told no. And this is what when I teach conflict and negotiation, I do a version of this for their journal assignments. I had no idea that it was the same thing, but it's rejection therapy. It's the idea of doing something, knowing you're going to be told no, and then becoming okay with being told no. I remember when I was in high school, I was a freshman in high school, and I had a crush on this young lady who actually turned out is a lesbian. But that's neither here nor there at the time. I had a crush on her, and we were very good friends. And one day, like a year down the road, and by the way, if it's been a year, it's not happening. If you're pining over somebody for a year, very low odds. But anyway, I expressed my feelings, and she very politely told me no, thank you. And obviously, I didn't freak out or anything like that. But then fairly rapidly after that, our friendship dissipated. And I look back on it and wonder how much of that was my fault. Was it because I was simply no longer interested in her for romantic potential that I left? And what I wish I had was maybe like an older sister to sit me down and be like, so you're just gonna stop being friends with her because she doesn't want to kiss you? Like, what kind of person are you? Like, that's what I needed to hear in that moment. And I think practicing rejection therapy allows you to have that conversation with yourself, as long as you're being honest about, what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Brief anecdote, that's so interesting. There's this place in Kansas City that's like a sex temple, and one of the things that they do is before you enter into session, you have to set your boundaries and desires, and then the person in charge asks you a question that you have to say no to. You practice holding your boundary before anything enters. So okay, so no touching tonight. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. It's your job to tell me no. Let's see if you can do that in front of other people. And they go, can I touch your hair? And it's your job to say, no, you can't touch my hair. And they say, why not? You go, I said you can't touch my hair. And before you enter into the space at all, preparing to say no as well. And that's, I don't think we teach people how to practice their boundaries. We're learning how to tell people to have them, but I don't think we give people space or to articulate the things that we already have. Maybe that's better, but I think that's part of it. So I'll answer this by saying two things. The first is I had a friend who he's probably still bad at dating. At the time, he was very bad at dating, and it's because he treated every woman he walked up to like she was supposed to be the person he spent the rest of his life with.
Oh, dating for marriage. That kills me. Sorry to interrupt. It just kills me.
Well, because like fucking pressure, right? Because even if you're right, talk about exhausting from the get-go. And what I taught him to say to hear is when a woman says no, she's saying, I've got great news. I'm not the person who's going to like you the way that she's going to. So why don't you understand that this is a great opportunity to go find someone who is going to want to spend time with you? And so like reframing rejection as opportunity, like, because no's are great. No's tell you where not to go. That's wonderful news. Do not enter signs save you a world of trouble. Just don't enter. Don't go that direction. So I think one of the things is that we teach men that they have to win so much. And so rejection isn't good news. And that makes it a battle between getting someone to give you what you want of them, which is an ugly mess. Another part of it is I don't think we've taught men that nobody owes them shit. I don't think we know that yet. I didn't know that. Like when I didn't realize that I needed to be told that. Yeah. And I don't think if someone would have said that directly, it would have hit. But I genuinely saw the world as something I was supposed to navigate through, and someone or something or a series of somethings taught me I was to own and win and have, instead of being community with. I think we need to reframe how we teach men to interact with other people in general before they can stop thinking that women don't owe them their time. I don't know. Whichever comes first.
I mean, I fully agree with both of you said. I mean, coming from Latin culture where it's very much, and I will admit there are moments where I have to catch myself because I was raised by my mom, my aunt, and my grandmother, a matriarchy in a way. However, there are still moments where I have to acknowledge in myself that, because I am my mother's guardian, I am my mother's power of attorney, medical power of attorney. And in teaching my mother boundaries, there are moments, because she's 71 and I put up boundaries and things, but there are moments where that Latin male that I have learned from periphery tries to rear his head, because my mom will try to break those boundaries. And it's not that she's being malicious, though sometimes she's being a brat because she loves being that way. But there's that moment where I will snap. I'm like, ya te dije, stop. And it's that definitive stop. There's no arguing with the fact that I said stop. And my mother will auto respond to that. I'm like, I'm sorry, but can you please just, I already asked you not to do this. But there is that cultural where it's this weird thing of Latin culture. And even though she's a very strong woman, that is something I have also had to unintentionally deconstruct, even though considering I am me. I'm a gay man raised by women, and I've made my own uncles cry because they pissed me off, but I don't defer authority just because they're like, it's an interesting thing I acknowledge to myself. I don't automatically respect men in terms of like authority. I will automatically respect a woman. Like I've worked for a law firm where it was all women. Automatically. Yeah, she's my boss, period. Okay, whatever you want. But the last firms before and after her were owned by men. And my reaction was like, prove to me you're worthy of for me to respect you. And so it's one of those things that was interesting that I've seen that is very limited with myself, though I've seen it in the Latino machismo culture much heavier from afar. I'm not necessarily fully part of it, but it is something that I think is going to does have to change. And it, bit by bit, I don't know where I was going with that, but I think my ADD took over.
No, I think so your upbringing taught you like what people deserve respect and what people don't, and in a very clear way because of the way your household operated, right? Like I think that one of the ways, you know, that we could teach young men is if the household structure or the people around them, and I want to be careful because what this could end up sounding like is if mothers just taught men right. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm actively pointing that out to say that I'm not saying that. If the adults that are around these young men were very cognizant of how it is good to hear women say no to men and men immediately respect it, and it is also good to have people vocalize their boundaries and have them respected without people asking more. If we could find a way to put that into our vernacular and make that clear, then I think that would help. Like I have a young daughter, and the way that we interact is not just whenever she says no, I stop, but also me saying no, this is my body and I don't want to be touched right now, and giving her practice and hearing someone, even someone in authority, say, actually, I don't want my body to be touched. Why are you touching my body right now? I would like to not be touched in this moment. Just to practice that, not in a way that takes away affection, because she's still a child, but in a way that says, you need to learn early. Sometimes people don't want their bodies to be touched, and it's a big deal to do that. So that vernacular in household structures and in the community they're surrounding, I think that would be a great way to teach us how we respect people growing up.
And I think also at a societal level, if you could teach or encourage young men and boys to have idols and role models that are women, and to idolize them for things that have nothing to do with their physical appearance. Like, for example, we have countless men who are idolized for their athletic prowess, and at the same time, there are plenty of women deserving of that same sort of admiration. You know what I mean? People worship LeBron James, but we don't get that same sort of worship for Serena Williams, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, if you can create role models for young boys who are women, it kind of gets back to what Nathan was saying about how, like, yeah, you might automatically give respect to a powerful woman because that's just a normal thing to do. Whereas for many young men, when it comes to respecting women, it's a task, it's an effort. You know what I mean? It's part of the unlearning process. And so one of the ways in which we can help is to prevent that need for unlearning by kind of nipping it in the bud.
You just brought back such a big childhood memory for me that I didn't realize. Like, I had to be told by men to not like or respect effeminate things. I didn't have to be told to respect it. I think one of the things that we could do is have men kind of shut the fuck up if they're still toxic. Just because when I was a kid, if someone was strong, it didn't matter if they were a man or woman. It's like, that person is strong, good, and it's like, you don't want to be like her, do you? Like it got shut the fuck down. Like in little things like toys or colors, but also in people. I think that's a way that it gets passed down too. It is like I think that a lot of us end up already kind of set up thinking people are great until society gets a hold of us. Maybe that's me. I don't know.
I idolized Hillary Clinton for the longest time, and but not even 100% sure remember why. I just thought she looked strong, and I was like 9. And Cher. I tried being Cher for Halloween one year. My mom burnt the wig because she tried ironing it, so I had to be I had to be Bill Clinton instead. And
well, let me ask you this: Have you ever seen Bill Clinton and Cher in the same room at the same time?
I can't say
actually, you haven't. I can't say I have. I think there's, I think you have something there. Plus,
wow.
Though I do recommend, for a comedic thing about Hillary Clinton, is read the book called The Residents, because it's a book from the perspective of the White House staff, like the housekeepers, valets, and all them, because they never change. So they know all the cheesemen. And there's a special segment that it takes place during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, that they shed light on like the humanity of Hillary, because I think very few people actually humanize Hillary Clinton, but also just what do you do when the wife of the president beams him? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Fantastic book. The audiobook is beautiful. And so I think we have one more question. It's from Miranda Major. Do you feel it is a mistake to encourage a mentally and physically whole, healthy persona in a young man rather than the idea of masculinity? And I'm not 100% sure how that can be interpreted, but I'll allow either one of you to interpret that question.
Would you please repeat it?
Yeah, that was, yeah.
Do you feel it is a mistake to encourage a mentally and physically whole, healthy persona in a young man rather than an idea of masculinity?
I think that the latter is much easier. And so I think that the way that I'm interpreting this question is, obviously, in a perfect world, we would be encouraging men to be like healthy and a whole persona. But in practice, it's so much easier to just plop a little boy down and be like, you will be strong and you will be fast and you will make decisions and you will be a leader. And then, alternatively, the counter with young girls. But I think that that former, or rather the latter, is a bit of a cop-out. So I understand why it might not be perceived as a good idea to do that, because you're taking all of this effort and like really trying to like force nuance into the mind of a young boy, and it can backfire, it can bounce right off. Ultimately, I think that the mistake is to put like the onus on the person raising the young boy, when in reality, there are systemic issues that need to be addressed. Like, obviously, you can do everything in your power to make sure that your young boy isn't a turd, but it really revolves around crafting infrastructure that prevents the Tate factor from occurring. It's and that's a long, arduous process, but I do feel like if we hyper focus on like what can I do for the young man in my life, we are going to miss the forest for the trees.
Andrew, I see your wheels turning.
Well, the question was very familiar for me, and I don't know this person meant it this way. But I'll tell you how people from circles I grew up in would have meant what she said. To point to an individualism that involves your own identity instead of your role in society was usually suggested to be something sinful or something selfish or something that would lead to a overly independent, lazy person. Here's how the rhetoric works. You'll teach your kid to be themselves and be whatever they want, but are you teaching them to be a man? Are you teaching them to be a man, like a real man? Like, that's how the rhetoric works. I'm not saying this person meant that, and I don't know how to answer the question assuming they didn't mean that, so I'll speak to whoever thinks that way then.
Beautiful.
We've been duped into thinking that there's this one way of being a man, and it only works if it is gruff and brusque and with a certain income and a certain work ethic and a certain amount of hours outside of the house and a certain essentialism to his like masculine self that doesn't make him anything like his partner, who is obviously, of course, a woman in this case, because this breaks down as soon as you throw gay people into the equation or any queerness at all. And but we've been duped. It does not develop a healthy person just because it fits a societal role, because the societal role is not for that person's health. It's for the health of people that will never know this young man's name or care about him, who need him to be a good factory worker or a good imperialist device, or someone who makes minimum wage and makes more babies, and those babies end up fitting into these perfect societal roles, so that's a very, very few amount of people get very, very rich. We got tricked hard. And so if we pretend that the way that we raise people is making sure they fit their role is never going to be for them, and it's never going to be for their health, because the people that design their role don't give a damn about your babies. These young men can't be whole men if they aren't taught to be healthy people outside of whatever you would assign the things they enjoy as masculine or feminine or whatever else. So it is not a bad idea to teach them to be whole healthy people. I would argue you can't teach them to be men if you don't start by teaching them to be whole persons. And then if they realize that they're a man along the way, they're going to be the healthiest man you've ever seen, if you let them be healthy people first, regardless of what you're assigning to them.
And a good society is made by healthy people, for the most part. It's trying to get a healthier society, or does an unhealthy society breed unhealthy people? America's great, isn't it?
The best. Now, everything that's being said about societal problems is absolutely right. I didn't mean.
Oh no, I fully agree.
Individualistic, but I hope y'all see what I'm saying. There's like this gender essentialism that we throw up there for societal roles still sits there as almost like an anti-socialist thing within certain conservative groups. Maybe almost was too weak. It is that, isn't it? That's the rhetoric that gets used.
Yes, but okay, and this is the big question, and I'm gonna what about the men who are bricklayers? Because if 99% of men are bricklayers, then what are we supposed to do? Make it completely equal? I don't know. That's me fading out of my Jordan Peterson impression. Yeah, no, I definitely echo everything that Andrew was saying there. I feel like what this really comes down to is if you have to ask that question of, but are you a man? But is he a man? But are you raising a man? Maybe you're the one who doesn't know what a man looks like because you're fucking looking at one, buddy. You know what I mean? When it's like when the folks I know who are much more misogynistic love to say things about me painting my nails, and it's just ribbing, but at the same time it's you really think that makes me less of a man? And it's tempting to get into the old misogynistic tropes of okay, well, why don't we compare our rap sheets and see who's been with more people? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do that because that's childish. But I sure do think it loud, and I feel like that's part of the unlearning process that I still need to get through.
Well, ain't that a trip though? Even when trying to forge a new path, when the very masculinity we're trying to redefine gets questioned, the only tools we have to fight back, because the ones that have been given to us for so long, are the toxic ones. It's just they're still right there, the utility belt. It's well, let me pull out body counts on this.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It's a mess. But I think conversations like this make it easier, because we're sitting here being able to say, we enjoy things. I honestly think that's a big piece of it. Like the amount of men that I don't hear talk about enjoying fucking like just anything.
Yeah. They all seem so sad.
Like,
exactly.
I think a lot of things could change rather quickly if there's a way that we can make part of men gathering just talking about the things they're enjoying, and it can't be anything that you feel like you've won or conquered. What do you enjoy? Like, I think that would be so nice.
I love that idea.
I had some very nice puppy cuddles prior to this chat that I enjoyed very much.
Oh. And you of course have the cutest puppy. I saw him. Where's my child? She'll want cuddles in about another few minutes. I already know it 'cause I can hear her doing the thing.
I finished a garden bed today that
I'm
very
nice.
about. A raised
That's nice.
bed. I'm gonna be planting some vegetables, and I'm very excited.
Oh, any specific vegetables?
Probably. So in this particular bed, I think it's going to be a number of like nightshades. You know, like eggplant, peppers, and tomatoes. I think I'm gonna be doing that. So
I wish I could have a garden, but I'm learning that my green thumb may have been fading over the years because there's certain plants that I have inside this house that are like, and I love them. I'm like, you know what? You're just gonna look like I'm Morticia Adams, and this makes the whole aesthetic much better. So
it does.
The only thing that's really surviving are the ivies, and of course, they're the things that are surviving. So
right, yeah, they're just gonna grow forever.
Yeah, I'm not even worried about them. I'll forget to water them for like a good chunk of time because I don't look up because one is up on the ceiling. And I'm like, oh, that's right, you exist. Oh, that's right. When you're 5'4", you don't need to look up often. Like, I mean, you do and don't.
Oh my goodness.
All of that's just unused space to me.
So are you truly 5'4"?
I am truly 5'4". We are a small people.
That is fantastic.
I agree. Every flight is a first-class flight. And it comes in handy for several other things, and plus my center of gravity is significantly lower, so I can lift heavier than somebody else who's taller. And technically, I will live longer if it comes to heart issues, because your heart doesn't really grow in size, dependent upon how tall you are.
That makes sense. Yeah, you are 7.5 inches shorter than me.
How tall are you?
I'm just under 6 foot.
I forget we make humans that tall. I met somebody who was 6'9".
That's more people than I thought you would say. That's a lot.
That's more people than I thought we could create. I did not know we came in. I mean, because I've met like people like Peter Mayhew. I've met him, and he of course had the genetic disorder of what he was like over 7 feet. But I didn't know people just got that tall.
6'9", you'd have to go up on him.
Well, thankfully I did not, because that was not the interaction I met him for. But I have, so just to talk, if we're going to talk about that, I did enjoy a man's company years ago who was about that tall. And if you've ever seen like a Great Dane trying to mount a Chihuahua, it was kind of the same thing. Because there's only one, I know TMI, but there's only really one position you can do.
I'm just picturing you in one of your bigger hats. And that was just... Oh.
And the problem is I don't look, when I'm go on dating sites, I don't care about their height. It's the least deciding factor for me. So I rarely look at their height. And then this was back years, I was probably like 25, 26. And he walks up and was like, you don't even fit through the door. And my first thing is logistics.
Well, I mean, he didn't fit through the door, so he's not going to fit through the door.
I mean, he fit through the door. Both doors. But anyway, we have gotten off track.
Love is an open door.
I mean, it is. And if you say such pretty things, it can be a very easily open door. But say it. You want to say it, James?
I'm doing the hetero white guy thing where I shrink to the size of a penny.
Andrew, stop swooning. I can see your eyes from here.
I'm loving it. I'm just loving this. This is fun and at no one's expense. And I think if more men did this, then it would be
I agree. I've only had a few of the sexual conversations regarding gay sex with only a handful of the straight men that I know. One was a friend from college. I am the godfather to his firstborn. Which I'm like, you better live a long time because I don't even know if I have the funds to do the thing. But we would have these open, candid discussions because he had met me. At the time, I was only about 18, not even 8. I was 18. I met him. He was 22. He was older for college. And we met in a communications class. And then one day I was much heavier and I had this time I dressed for that time period and how I dressed. I had a big old shawl, a hand fan, and I was significantly heavier. And I just looked out in the crowd, into the room, and I was like, okay, so I want to be able to drink this weekend. Who can buy me vodka? And he was like, well, I'm of age. And I was like, okay, well, I'll give you the cash. And everybody just looked at me. I was like, you're not going to get anything if you don't ask. And we wound up drinking together, getting drunk and playing Halo. And then that kind of stirred this friendship of us talking about what was me as a gay man. What was that? What did that mean? And because he admitted, as like, I've been mostly homophobic my entire life. And I've eased up on it as I've gotten older and it's kind of moved out of this small white town I grew up in. But being able to relate with you and understand, and we would have full conversations about the nitty-gritty of both sides of what we do in the bedroom. Because I have never been with a woman. I've never even been through a vaginal canal. I was removed like a tumor because I was trying to kill my mother, and that honestly was on brand. That is on brand.
That's a step above gold star.
I was evidently putting my foot up against that cervix. Like, you find another way, or neither one of us are getting out of here alive. Like, and so anyway, so we had these full conversations because Texas health classes are really a joke. But in terms of sexual health, but having this discussion of like, well, what happens when two men have sex? I'm like, well, there's quite a lot you can do. But no, we had these full discussions, kind of like two straight men would have with each other about what they've done. But I was a gay man, he was a straight man. We would talk about it, and just kind of like, how'd that date go? This happened. Okay. How'd that date go? He's like, I don't think she was into me. And I was like, okay. And he was like, it's cool. I mean, that's fine. But I acknowledge now as we've gotten older, he was much more emotionally mature than he gave himself credit for, even then. Because he was like, I'm just this kind of whatever. Like, but looking back now, to me then, it was like, oh, wow. Okay, here's one of my closest friends is this straight man. And we have these discussions. And it's only been a handful of times I've had that where we can just be like, okay, this is what it do. And it's not necessarily that different from what y'all do. It's just there's different parts involved. So, well, yeah.
No, you touched on something that was really fascinating for looking back, I can see now why it wasn't fascinating for me and it just felt normal. That makes sense. But how many straight men that I got to know in college that couldn't understand gay men at all because of how much everything about their life revolved around getting with a woman. Like,
it's like their identity. Yeah.
The whole thing. It's the whole thing. It's just like, so like I could see someone walking up to you, it's like, so I hear you have no interest in women. How are you here? What do you think about the rest of the time? Like, and it's just this fascinating thing. Like there's this whole other part of life.
Oh yeah. And even then there's the whole other part of like not just masculinity, but trying to break down all thatness within gay culture, because like I've never looked at women sexually, period. Like there was never that like, well, let me try, because I've had friends who have tried, and for me I was just like, no. But I kind of went from, I knew what I wanted and I got what I wanted in my early teens, but then as far as like I need to hide this, I basically became what other people would perceive as asexual at that time. What they perceived, what I was actually doing was gay, but because I wasn't dating women, I wasn't really flirting with women. I went to prom with female friends, and so, but there was no sexual acts with women because it was never something that interested me. However, were there sexual acts with men? Absolutely. Well, yeah. During those formative years of as I was developing. But for me, I was like, I've never even explored what that means. The only reason I know what it's supposed to look like is because, of course, I have watched documentaries and people and all the modern media that does talk about it. But other than that, I'm like, I didn't even go through it. So, and so I think we are at a fantastic stopping point for y'all. I know it's late for you in the future, and I'm sure you have things in the past that you want to do. And here I am stuck in the 1940s here in Texas. But I do want to thank both of you for joining me today. This has been a fantastic talk. And before we go, is there any quick little statement you'd want to say to anybody out there, or any organizations you want people to support in this time? Andrew, you're welcome to go first.
Okay. I would say if there is a local mutual aid or direct action group in your community, they are most likely fighting for making change on your city level or county level. The stuff that you don't really hear talked about much on the news where you are. Pay attention to them. They're doing good work. They need your support. They won't be hard to find. If you want access to other organizations, I can tell you about them, but look for a local mutual aid or direct action group in your community. They need your support.
Fantastic.
I'll say if you're within a couple of driving hours of southern Utah, there is an uproar of drag performances that are happening in my neck of the woods. They're being met with substantial resistance, and bodies are always welcome. There are cafes and libraries and other establishments that are hosting mostly beginner drag shows. There are a couple of, we'll call them unintentional death falls, and that's perfectly okay. And it is about community, and it is about giving these folks a reason to stay in you know, a place like southern Utah is a place that is in desperate need of culture of any kind. So if you're looking to take a road trip or just help that community, I mean, you can donate to like Southern Utah Pride. That's great. But physical presence is what they want. So that would be my call.
Thank you so much, James. And that's been so true. We had I forget which thing. I think it was a drag story out where those boys try to protest. And San Antonio's not a city you play with. You don't. It's a massive blue city. All the major cities, for the exception of two, are very blue within Texas. So any of those Proud Boys try to do anything, it's not. No, we're still Texans.
Yeah, we don't have that here. We don't. I mean, you're not going to see Proud Boys because the special kind of hate that Utahns have is a very quiet type of hate and a very judgmental type of hate. It's not a violent hate, which is good in many ways, but it also means that the community is exposed and vulnerable in a way that San Antonio simply isn't, because of the infrastructure of radical queerness that simply just isn't in Southern Utah. We're a few decades behind in that regard.
Fully understood. And so, yeah, if you are in driving distance of Southern Utah, please make a road trip. I'm sure there's fantastic shows, and a good drag show or story time is always a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who was a former queen, they're always a fun time.
What was your drag name?
Ursula Velour.
Oh, I love that.
But it's been probably about 8 years since I performed. And I walk in heels still? Yes. Can I dance in them still? My knees would side-eye me if I tried. I could do it.
Once.
It sounds to me like you need to come to Southern Utah and show these queens how it's done.
I mean, probably. I love a good road trip, and I've been to Northern Utah when I used to do celebrity hospitality in Salt Lake City. I think that's Northern Utah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I passed through there a couple months back to get to California. So I've never actually been to Southern Utah. So
it's beautiful.
Oh, I've heard nothing but good things about it. That's geography.
Yeah, if you've ever watched We're Here, it's Bob the Drag Queen show. They came to my town. Yeah, they were in my town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was at the performance. It was lovely.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, I think I need to plan a road trip to Southern Utah.
I have a guest room.
With James. On that, my loves, thank you both for being here. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And y'all have a good night.
Bye. Take care. Have a good one.
See you, everyone.
Go.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of Talking Tea with Auntie, being a man and breaking down toxic masculinity. As always, I'm so grateful you're here, and if you enjoyed this content, feel free to subscribe, turn on that notification bell, whatever you got to, and whatever app you're watching or listening to this on. As always, I gotta give a big thank you to all my patrons on Patreon that make my content possible. Without them, I couldn't create this content or pay my bills, so I'm very grateful for y'all. An exceedingly special thank you to those patrons who ask questions of our guests: Heather, Denise P., and Miranda Major. If you would like to ask questions of our next guest, feel free to become a patron on my Patreon for as low as $3 a month. Patreon.com/Shining Nathan. I'd be very grateful if you considered, because, well, Patreon's my primary form of income. I must thank our two fantastic guests, Andrew and Dr. James Stein, for agreeing to be on this show. It is really wonderful to have guests that are willing to speak with me and interview about their daily lives on special topics. Now be sure to be on the lookout for our next episode, which will be coming up within a week in honor of Black History Month. And we will be talking about being a black woman in America. I'm sure it's going to be very informational, educational, and eye-opening. So I'm very excited to interview these two beautiful women in the next upcoming episode. So be on the lookout and go to my Insta. You'll get all notifications there in my story when they come out. As always, I love every single one of you. I'm grateful every single one of you's here. Remember, take care of yourself, drink some water, and I love you, honey.